Hi. As you'll recall, I like to use songs not necessarily as tutorials to master every element of the song, but to see how we can develop your playing through the use of the ideas that we find there. I like to build incrementally, taking one idea, adding one little touch to it, and coming up with another. Along that line of thinking, I want to look at Pretty Woman and how that can be used in playing the Beatles' Day Tripper. When we learned Orbison's song, we learned that we had E, G sharp, B, and D, and that's spelled an E7 chord. Then the F sharp made it a 9. So we used that E7 to set up the key of A. That was the 5 chord in A. We had A's and F sharp minors, the 1 and 6, and the 4 and the 5, the D and the E. Using a very similar range and the same key signature of A, we also looked at Crazy Train and saw this F sharp minor. F sharp is the relative minor of A. We had many of the same notes. We had the open E, the D, the B, the G sharp, the A that we run into in the other song. So there's an interchangeability there. Not that one song developed from the other, but they come from the same family of ideas. In the same vein, Day Tripper uses an E7 chord as well. I've written it here using the 5th fret D. We don't actually play it like that, but I want it showing there so you can see that it's the same note that we had in Pretty Woman. I don't think the Beatles necessarily got this riff from Roy Orbison, but they were huge Roy Orbison fans. So they're both E7 chords. In the Orbison tune, we had E, G sharp, and B. That spells an E chord, 1, 3, and 5. And then the D I put out here, that's the flat 7, making it an E7 chord. The Beatles will play that as well. What they don't do is go straight to the G sharp. They use a G natural first. This is a very bluesy idea, to play both the 3 of the chord and the flat 3 or minor 3. So they've gone E through the G to the G sharp to a B to another E. This B and E here you recognize from all your E chords. They're sitting there in an E major, in E minor, or an E5. So they're playing toward that E5. In my image, I put the D here at the 5 because that's how Orbison had it, sitting out there. There's the same F sharp for the 9. And then B, D, and E again. Now, a lot of you probably decided not to use that pinky in Pretty Woman, although I asked you to because I like the fingering and it's more accurate to the playing. In this song, we don't actually play the D at the 5th fret. We play the open D the way you recognize it from before. So we used that riff in Pretty Woman to set up an A song. We used a similar placement of our fingers in Crazy Train to play in the key signature of A, but probably in the F sharp minor, the relative minor. Now we're using our riff, E7, to actually play in E. So we need a 1, 4, 5 in E, which you've learned are E, A, and B. We haven't worked much on that B yet. We've used B7 though. And what we found out in another song is that the blues songs can actually insert 7s on all of the chords. E7 is the 1, A is the 4, and you can make it a 7 in the bluesy songs. And the only chord that should have a 7 theoretically is the 5th chord, the B. But in the blues they can all have it. So the riff is a dominant 7 riff played on each of those chords. Another idea you've learned from blues bass is that after you played the riff on the 1 chord, you can move up a 4th, which is on guitar to move another string, and repeat it on that chord and then come back. So the Beatles are doing that as well. They play the E chord, after 4 of those, they move up a string and do it on A. And back to E. exact same riff, the exact same fingering. Although they play the E 4 times rather than twice. At one point they'll come to the 5 chord and play it on the B. We don't have an open B string, so it's much harder to play there. So we go B, open D to D sharp, O1, F sharp, the 5th of the chord, and the B on the next string, A, F sharp, up to C sharp here, or on another string you'll see some people play if you go to look at any tutorials. Notice I want my hand generally in the 2nd fret, pointer finger, 2nd finger, 3rd, and perhaps 4th. In the B chord I have to move back for a moment, but then I'm going to move back up to have my ring finger on the 4s again. That's called position shifting and sometimes very necessary in guitar. The other idea that they have here that is similar to what we've run into is this song now moves to an F sharp chord. Again, I'm not going to show you all of the details. This is an F sharp 7 with some guitar playing the 7s there, and sometimes you can hear a high 7 here on it. But the bulk of the sound is actually a power chord, and you guys already know your power chords. So I want to run through those then. So after we've done our E riff for an intro, and during the verse 4 times, pretend that was 4, then we move to the A, back to the E. At the chorus, where they sing Day Tripper, we'll do the F sharp power chord. I will use 3 fingers. So I have a 2, a 4, and a 4. This is the F sharp note, it's 5th, the C sharp, and then another F sharp. Then the A, G sharp, C sharp on the next string, the B. B's are the 5s, setting up our return to the E. This little area is interesting. There's a relationship between the E's and the C sharps, just as we saw in the Roy Orbison song Pretty Woman, between the A's and the F sharp minors. So the C sharp is the 6 of E. It ought to be a C sharp minor in that key. F sharp should also be minor, and so would G sharp. But there's a bluesy idea here at play as well. We're taking those 3 chords and making them dominant 7s as well. And then the same scale can be treated as a C sharp blues and as an E blues. Those details are way down the road for you in terms of your theoretical understanding. For now, just treat them as power chords. If you're super motivated and want to go on and learn all the details of this and develop your chords further than power chords right now, feel free. It's just that that's not really the best use of our time at this moment in terms of progressing incrementally. If we're doing this weekly, adding one little bit to your playing at a time, then using your power chords now, getting you around the neck and covering chords, is the better way to go. If you are devoted to daily practice and you really got excited about learning the bar chord and turning it into a dominant 7, that would be amazing, that's great. But in terms of adding to your playing logically and linearly, I wouldn't do that yet. I want to use mostly what you know every time out and just change one little thing. In terms of this song, we're basically adapting a riff we already knew in Pretty Woman and using it in the Beatles song Day Tripper. We're changing one little note here. We're we're adding a bluesy G, but I want you to see that these are not similar by accident or random mistake. They're similar because we're drawing from the exact same ideas. So you want to learn them that way too. Know that they're similar for those reasons, and then you can memorize them in relationship to one another. So we've got our E riff, up a string as the blues does to the 4 chord, back to the main riff, like Pretty Woman and Crazy Train, we go to F sharp minor, or in this case F sharp 7, but we're just using a power chord. The 4 chord to a G sharp, C sharp. You're hearing lots of tension on these chords. You can tell you're out of key with the idea. To the B, that's the 5 chord, back to E. Another time we'll go from that B chord to the B riff. And those are all the parts of the song. That's a good beginner level for this. In fact, it's a fairly advanced beginner, but some of the ideas are left at the same level that you've developed them already. So that's all I want to do with that. Have a good time with it, and we'll catch you later. Happy guitaring.